Hello, I'm Craig and welcome to another episode of Football Kit Memories, the football podcast that gets under the shirt. Today I meet a legend of Scottish comedy, Mr. Phil Differ. Since the 1980s, Phil has written and produced for some of the most memorable and iconic shows on stage and screen, including Not the 9 O'Clock News, Spitting Image and Chewin the Fat. He's perhaps best known for the long-running Scottish football impression-based satire Only an Excuse, which began life on radio but transitioned to TV in 1993. In the following 27 years, the show became a New Year's Eve institution in Scotland, with main actor Jonathan Watson playing a host of characters, including Frank McAvennie, Kenny Dalsglish and Sir Alex Ferguson, just before the bells rang each year. In the podcast, Phil talks to me about the show, his career and his latest play on the life of former Dundee United boss Jim McLean, which is rather aptly called Smile. The play is available to stream for a limited time on the Dundee Rep Theatre website. There's links to that in the notes section. Later, I asked Phil to pick out 3 favourite football shirts and tell me a little bit about what they mean to him. We take a nostalgic look back at Scottish football in the 60s with the Hoops shirt Celtic wore in Lisbon in 1967 and the national team goalkeeper jersey worn in the win over England at Wembley that same year. We finish things off with a look at the Brazil shirts from the 1970 and 1982 World Cups. Phil clearly loves his shirts. Remember, you can listen to this and other episodes of Football Kit Memories on all major audio platforms including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please do like, follow and share, but above all, please do enjoy the podcast. So today on the podcast, I'm joined by a legend of Scottish comedy. It's Mr. Phil Differ. How you doing, Phil?
Hi, Craig. Nice to see you.
Thanks so much for doing this, mate. Really excited to talk to you.
Not at all.
So look, as I mentioned just there, you've had a really, really long career in comedy. You started out in the 80s writing for shows like Not the 9 O'Clock News, Spitting Image. I just wanted to know, how did you start out?
The thing, before I began writing, when I used to watch television, obviously I watched a lot of comedy. I didn't realise I was a student of comedy at that time. I just watched it for the enjoyment. But I was always intrigued when it said written by, and there would be half a dozen names, you know, the guys that wrote the stuff. And I used to think, I wonder how you actually do that. How do you write comedy? You know, like, do you go out and listen to those jokes and then write them down, or do you nick them, or what is it you do? I was always really intrigued by that, and I used to buy books of scripts. You know, and there was always these books called How to Write Comedy and things like that. And I used to read them, but they never really helped. And then one year at Christmas, it must have been mid-70s, my mother had got me the book. It was Santa Claus got me the book. It was Ripping Yarn, the series Ripping Yarn. Right. Michael Palin was in, and it was the script of it. And it said written by Michael Palin and Terry Jones, and it was in script form. And there was a moment that something clicked there, and I thought, so you actually write, you know, Jim, and he says a line, and Tom says a line, and then, you know, enter something. You actually write a script. I've never seen a script written down before, and I just thought, I want to do that. I really want to do that. The way in was difficult then. I think it was pretty much a closed shop, and everything was getting made in London. But in 1980, Radio Scotland did a show called Naked Radio, and it was unashamedly Scottish. It was made in Scotland, recorded in Edinburgh, and it was Scottish writers. Right. And at that time, I had just left my work. I worked in the post office. I'd left there to go to college. So it was a kind of, at that moment, my life was sort of changing. I thought, I'm just going to write stuff and I'll send it in, and hopefully they'll like it. And through that, you meet other writers, you meet producers, and everybody gives you a wee bit of help, a wee bit of advice. So I was able to build up from then. But I was writing for Not the 9 and Spitting Image, not vast amounts, I have to say, and Kick Up the 80s. Stuff like that when I was at college. So that was 1980 when I really started writing.
A real long time, pal. So you're part of the comedy unit production house in Glasgow for many years as well, and that's been responsible for some like really iconic kind of Scottish comedy programs, and not just Scottish, kind of like, across the nation, people will know Rabsy Nesbitt, Still Game, Limmy, that kind of stuff. But I guess you're best known for being involved in the Only an Excuse program that aired at, I guess, like for people that don't follow Scottish football, Only Excuse is like an institution of Scottish football and Scottish comedy that ran every New Year, I think for 27 years, right?
Oh, it's something like that. I stopped.
And it only just recently finished. So in 2020 was the last one, and there was like this really amazing special on BBC Scotland. I just wanted to ask you a bit about kind of, what your thoughts on that coming to an end after so many years. I read this really nice phrase that you guys use. You'd had a good kick at the ball, you said, kind of thing. It had been going for a long time, but it's a real kind of like much loved institution, isn't it?
I always thought it was like being in a band. Every year we made an album,
Yeah.
and we hoped that we captured the zeitgeist, if you like. It did become a bit restrictive as we got on. In the later years, there's an awful lot of things we couldn't do, and you can't do that, and you better watch this. And
right.
The BBC was a wee bit warier of some of our excesses, shall we say. Back in the early day, back in '86, the advantage was no one had ever done a football comedy show before. So we were really given carte blanche. It was like, all right, on you go, see what you come up with. We went into a radio studio. It was Sunday. There was myself, Johnny Watson, and Tony Roper, and we recorded. It was a half-hour show. I think we recorded about 5 hours worth of material, because really, I didn't know. That was the first thing I'd ever produced alone myself. So it was great to get that freedom, and we did everything, and then we edited it and managed to get it down to half an hour. And the success of that, I think it caught everyone, because no one saw that coming. Basically, there was no football comedy. There's a lot of football comedy now. There was none then. We were all young and eager and full of ourselves.
Yeah.
And they repeated the radio show quite a few times, and then they commissioned others, and then it sort of built up from then. In the later years, I mean, the higher the profile it gets, the more attention it seems to get, and the more, everybody, they say, "Oh, I don't think you should do that, and why don't you do this, and we could do this."
Right.
And you lose a bit of the control of it. That was the thing I felt, and it was just trying to keep it together, keep it true to the ethos of what it had been.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did broaden it. We found that there was as the years went by, there was a lot of some of the football characters were leaving football.
Yeah.
And the new characters weren't good characters for us to do, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So we broadened it, and we brought in a bit of politics, a bit of this, and a bit of that. And some of it was good. I kind of, but if I could do it again, I'd probably stuck more with the football. But hindsight's a great thing. I mean, the reason we did the other things was to try and expand the appeal of it,
Yeah. Well, if something's been going that long, you've got to mix it up, I guess, haven't you? You've got to try new things, otherwise it becomes stale.
I know that was. I mean, for instance, take a character like Frank McAvennie, Johnny's character, not the real Frank. Like at first people couldn't get enough of it. Where's the birds and all that? Oh, they love it. And then it's like 1 year, went, oh no, him again. And suddenly, you realise that you've overstayed your welcome a wee bit. So he kind of got demoted slightly while we waited for others to come through. And there wasn't a lot of characters. I mean, they all suffered from that. Like the thick young character was one that we used a lot. Even initially, we had a narrator with William McAvennie who narrated only a game. The show was a of, and he got demoted as well. Everybody got in new guys, Of course, we're all getting older as well. I mean, but that was it. When we started doing it. we were in our 30s, and then when we finished, we were in our 60s. And that's changes a bit, and actors get older and things like that. So you adapt as it goes on.
Yeah. So I guess you're looking forward to your first Christmas off in 27 years then?
Well, do you know, that's an interesting you pointed that out. I mean, before I did Only an Excuse, I did Scotch and Rye, which was huge as well with Ricky Fulton. That was a Hogmanay schedule sort of thing. So I think I did the first one of those in 88 or 89. Wow. So I haven't had a Christmas, New Year, off. I've always been making a programme. Yeah. And for the last whatever that is. And the thing is, it's really interesting. I always carry a notebook wherever I go. And a couple of times recently, I've got out my notebook to make a note for Only an Excuse. And I don't need to worry about that this year. So it'll be odd. I'll probably still keep notebooks everywhere, and I'll scribble, and I'll for a programme that's never going to be made. It's a habit. Come the beginning of December, when we would normally go filming, I think that's when I'll really miss it. And the filming, basically we used the same crew for almost the entirety. The same designer, makeup, wardrobe. The scene crew guys. Everybody was the camera, sound. Usually the same guys. So we built up a great camaraderie and friendship.
Well, I guess you can move on to other stuff, and talking about icons in Scottish football, as you kind of parodied on that show. You wrote a play recently about Jim McLean, who is the kind of long-serving Dundee United manager, really successful as well. The play's called Smile.
Background, I met Jim McLean twice, and he got a reputation for being quite grumpy, we say. One occasion I met him, he was in a bad mood. Someone had him, it was a Q&A night.
Right.
And he had been irked about a question about contracts. United were notorious for long contracts. And,
yes.
So there was the whole thing, and he was being wound up by an agent, and he was absolutely furious. I've never seen anybody in such a bad mood.
Wow.
Absolutely crazy. I was kind of I'd heard about it, but I'd never seen him like that. So anyway, I thought, well, that's Jim McLean. That's what he does. And then we had him on a show called Offside with Tam Cowan, and he was a guest on it. And met him in the green room, and he was a completely different guy. He was quite, quiet and quite shy, and he did the show, and he came off the show, and he went very well. He was funny, he was amusing, and he played keepy uppy, and he could still do all the stuff with the ball and all that, So we're sitting in the green room, and he calls me over, and he says, Phil, and I went over, and he says, what's the difference between writing for television and writing for theatre? And that was the question he asked me, because we'd done a lot of Only an Excuse stage shows with this thing. Presumably he'd come to see one, and we didn't know. But so we had this chat about it, and I suddenly thought there's a wee seed planted away at the back of my mind about this guy, the public image, and what the guy who was sitting there asking a serious question about the last thing in the world you think Jim McLean would be interested in.
Yeah, of course.
So I tucked it away, and then one day I was up in Dundee, and I was passing Dundee Rep, and honestly, it was like a kind of hippie thing. There was a calling. I thought, I want to work in there. And there was a vibe about the place. It was just, as I was passing it, I was visiting a friend who lived on the street that Dundee Rep was. So kind of synergy, and the gods and the stars all aligned.
Yeah.
I got to Dundee. I emailed her, listen, I think there's an idea in the Jim McLean story, a local thing and what have you. And fortunately, we agreed. And of course, the thing was, at the time, Jim was in hospital, suffering dementia.
Right.
So we had to clear everything with the family. So I got in touch with the family, and I went and visited Doris, his wife, and Gary, one of his sons. And basically had to pitch the idea to them, I'm going to write a play about your husband, your dad.
Yeah.
you know the reputation he has, but that's not what I want to do. I wanted kind of the real thing. And they were absolutely brilliant. Jim's family were brilliant. Wary, obviously, because you don't know what it's going to be like.
Of course.
I said to Doris, I says, I'm thinking of calling it Smile because he was so dour. And she laughed, and I thought, well, that's a good sign, and I could Gary smirked. He wasn't giving anything away. He was still watching it. And the first question I asked him was, I says, right, big question. Was Jim vain about his hair? Which, of course, he does terrible sweep over thing. And that was nice as well. And we laughed and laughed at that. And then they opened up and they gave me so much information. That was June 2018. I've got it written in my notebook. I've always scribbled because I know where, the timeline. Yeah. And we talked for hours. I think I went up a couple of times and we just gave us so much information and I kind of put together a version of Jim that probably the audience was never aware of, never saw very much. A very incredibly intense, private and shy man, and so the play became, one of the critics called it a love letter to Scottish football, which I loved because it was looking back at a time that doesn't exist anymore. Kind of players you don't get anymore. A lot of things that's gone, and I was wistfully looking back at. And it was the whole experience of making it was fantastic. The record's brilliant to work with. We did a lot of work. We did a week of just talking about it, like in the rehearsal room with a cast and a director, and we just talked and talked about what we're trying to say here. What do we do with this? What do we do with that? And it was brilliant. And then, of course, the night it opened, which was just before the pandemic, it just finished perfect. And then the pandemic kicked in. That was then lockdown. So we got it done. Imagine if we'd never got it done. But the first night was a Dundee United night, and there was a lot of the guys from Dundee United Trust were there, and there was about half a dozen of the players that had played with Jim.
Right.
And of course we've done this for a long time, but you never know how a piece is going to go. I mean, the audience might hate it, or just doesn't quite hit the mark or whatever. And the McLeans were all there. The family were there. His brother Willie was there. There was aunties and uncles and nieces and nephews, and everyone was there. So the night of the show, it couldn't have gone better. I mean, it really was. It was incredibly, it was emotional, and it was funny, and it was sad, and everything like that. But at the end of it, the thing for me that was so important was the players all say that was the word Paul Hegarty used was authentic. Because that was just true. It was just truth. It was authentic, and that for us was so important. For people have been sitting there going, "Oh, this is a whitewash," and it wasn't. It was warts and all, which the family wanted it. But their thing was, they said, "Can you make him funny?" Because he was funny. He had a very dull sense of humour, and I said, "No, absolutely. We don't want it to be Jim McLean punches people and things like that." Yeah. And that's the story, and it was, and the language was part of the story as well. So that was how it started. That's what we did. We were bowled over with the success of it. The audience really got it.
Yeah.
I think I think it's wide. I think any football crowd. I think anybody like a big football support, I think they would enjoy it. You don't need to be a Dundee United fan.
Yeah.
To enjoy it. The fact that Dundee United did what they did was a tremendous achievement. In the style of play and everything, but it was fleeting. It's that idea that, and United fans were saying this, they probably never get back to that again.
Yeah.
Scottish football will never get back to that again. But it was glorious, and I think that they liked it. I loved writing it. I mean, it was just great. He's a brilliant character. He's almost like a kind of I don't know, if you're making a film, you would need to bring back like John Wayne or Burt Lancaster. Douglas would be brilliant. He's just such a larger than life character, and it's like all these things you don't know what you've got till it's gone. You know,
Yeah, of course.
That ability is all lost now, and you know, but at least the play keeps him alive. You know,
Yeah.
aye.
There's some really nice kind of themes there that you're pulling out. I think, obviously, like he sadly passed away at the end of last year, I think, didn't he?
Aye.
But I do feel like that story, the story of his success that he had with Dundee United in the 80s, I really don't think it's widely known outside of Scottish football. And at times, kind of, it's maybe a generational thing. It doesn't get talked about often enough. I think I read a really good Guardian article last year, I think around the time he died, talking about they got to the semi-final of the European Cup in '84, I think, didn't they? And there were some issues around bribery around the referee, allegedly, and Roma went through to the final. It's just such an incredible story, like you say. And like I say, it kind of resonates for all football fans because it's amazing. They won the league. They got to the final UEFA Cup as well during that period too.
Aye, and there were. McLean himself described Dundee United as a corner shop on the supermarket. You know, that he saw them as and they were. They're not. They're an institution in Scotland, and you know, the other team. I've always had a soft spot for them. They were always a good footballing side. I mean, in the '60s, they signed an awful lot of Scandinavian guys who'd you know, like, and it was a different kind of football. They wore black and white. You know, the Canadice was this. You know, Canadice sound quite, you know, something from The Hobbit or something like that. You know, Winter Scotch with Canadice, or Canadice, as I heard it called once in a match of the day thing. But no, it's kind of. I also think that in the pantheon of managers, that, you know, there was Dr. Keane and Alex Ferguson, and Jim probably being third in that line, maybe never got the recognition that he achieved. You know, like, because he wasn't Steen, he wasn't Fergie, and he stayed up here, and maybe stayed too long. Maybe, you know, we touching that in the play, did have the chance to move, and that's something that, you know, again, in all our lives, we never know. If you're making the right or wrong decision, you know, it will tell. And he could have moved, and maybe he should have, but he had a loyalty, which is commendable, which you don't get these days as well. But it is a great story. I mean, it's you know, it's a kind of Roy of the Rovers thing. Everybody loves that. You know, it's a kind of Rocky for football. You know, a wee team just punches way above the ring, really, really fast. And ultimately, I think you're right. It was proven that there was bribery involved. Roma, I think the son of the referee, or the son of the chairman, came out and said, no, they had bummed the referee. They had. Usually watches and suits, apparently. But apparently, I mean, there's the famous image of Jim McLean walking off the pitch, and the Roma players are right in his face, you know, like giving him dog abuse. Paul Sturrock said there was a fight in the tunnel. Well, the Alamo, you know, around it. Apparently, there was some scuffles in the tunnel, which we do touch on that as well. So we cover everything on it, you know.
Nice. Well, I guess the good news is that I think it's for a limited time, isn't it? You can go onto the Dundee Rep Theatre website and stream a version of the play.
Yes, that's right. We adapted it a couple of months ago.
Right.
We were really delighted that there wasn't an awful lot we had to move or change or alter or anything like that. But that's as of Friday. That's up and running. So look forward to that as well. You know?
Friday the 16th of April. So what I'll do is I'll put a link out in the podcast notes and everybody can go see that for themselves. Yeah. I'm looking forward to watching that myself. So So, Phil, should we talk about your football shirt choices today?
Mm-hmm.
So, the first question I ask everybody on the podcast is, what do football shirts in particular mean to you?
Oh, but I love football strips.
Yeah.
And Johnny Watson's similar to me. We end up, we'll meet and we'll have discussions about some game. And eventually, inevitably, we'll say, we're thinking of strip. And we end up with the strip. I don't like that, but I don't like this. But I remember being in Amsterdam a good few years ago, and I was a football jersey shop that Johnny and I had visited. We were filming a Rab C episode.
Okay.
And we ended up in this shop looking at all the strips. And I was there years later, and they had it was the Inter Milan strip, and it was the black and blue, but it had a white collar.
Oh, nice.
And I said I says I would wear that to a wedding. It's just it was so good. So I've always had this thing about football strips.
Well, you've picked like three real classics here. We're going to start off with the Celtic shirt in 1967, the year, of course, they won the European Cup. How come you've chosen this one?
Well, obviously, I'm a Celtic supporter. I think that's obvious for that.
Yeah.
I think it's because, I mean, like, when I first got in, where I lived initially in Kilsyth, there was no area to play football. We lived in this sort of kind of, what you'd call a tenement, I suppose, a wee tenement, not quite a big one. But anyway, it was waste ground. But what we did in the waste ground was we played at Cowboys and Indians and, reenacted the Alamo and Zulu and all the films.
Yeah.
But there was nowhere to play football. When we moved around about 61, 62, we moved to a new house. There was a football pitch just down the road. And suddenly I would look at it, and there was all these guys playing football. I was not aware of it at all. Again, I'm only 6 or 7 at the time.
Right.
And on the way home from school, everybody played football. Jump at the goalposts. The old thing, school bags for goalposts, or a brick. Occasionally it would be a brick, which was always a couple of bricks. And this football thing, everybody seemed to be able to play. Dribble, pass. I'd never. Anyway, I started playing football and I really would love at first kick, or love at first swing and you miss it, and you just say, right, I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to learn. And of course, live football on television was a rarity. I used to go and watch the juniors. Kilsyth Rangers was a junior team, right, or the amateur team, the Kilsyth Amateurs, or St. Pat's, and we used to go and watch them. But when I started going to football, my uncle, a couple of uncles used to take me. It was the Celtic games, and I loved it more under the floodlights because the green and the white just seemed so white when they all looked like monsters, giants. I know that. I think Shankly said that about the red in Liverpool. It made them all look bigger. Somehow he said that. So I kind of loved the combination of the green and the white. The white was so incredibly white. And of course, I associate that with the Celtics run in Europe. They 66, they won the league for the first time in 100 years or something.
Yeah.
They had won the Scottish Cup the year before, which is probably the first Celtic game I can remember. And I just remember, that becomes the team when you're drawn to it. It's iconic, the green and white hoops have never changed. It's always been, they've messed about with it occasionally.
Yeah.
But it's, it always comes back to that. The plainness of the shirt as well. There's no stars or badge or anything. It was just a plain shirt. And it was my auntie, an auntie gave me it from a birthday. That must have been 67 or 66. I think it was the year before, 66. Gave me it from a birthday. And what I remember about it was it had great big long sleeves. The sleeves were like for a gibbon or something like that.
Hanging over.
And you'd roll it up about 20 times. And when it washed, the dyes right. It was just a cheap, it was an Umbro, but it just was crap, basically. And I had that for years, and I've still got it somewhere. It's about that size.
Wow. Totally shrunk.
It's shrunk a million, or I've got bigger. Maybe it's that. I've still got that. And every now and again, and the big long sleeve would probably fit me now. But it's just it's the memories of that, that year, obviously '67, winning the European Cup. Although we never go on about it, we just mention it every now and again. It was just fantastic, and having that. So the hoops will always be special for anybody at the team. I will say this, so let me controversially say that at that time I thought the Rangers strip was an absolute belter. What they call royal blue, as they call it, that dark blue with a V-neck, the red and black socks. I used to look at that and go, "God, that's a crack strip." But then I don't know about the late '60s Rangers then made it come out with a lighter blue and red and white. They changed it. They were the first team I ever remember that kind of footed a wee bit, anyway. But I always thought that was a great strip. And the other one I always liked at that time was Kilmarnock. It was playing the vertical blue. Again, that was a crack because they were a great team. They were the first league champions I can ever remember. They won the league in '65. And previous to that was Dundee. See, Dundee is a lovely, that dark blue. What was a crack strip as well. Early Dundee. But no, Celtic, it's the hoops. That's the one. That's the plain, simple plain hoops. That's the one for me.
Yeah, and it's just like, I think that story as well, the European Cup that they won, I think it's just another one of those stories in Scottish football, much like the McLean kind of story of Scottish football achievement, but it being very fleeting as well, and being an incredible story. But Scotland have had so many high points in football, and that certainly is one of them.
That was it. I think it's interesting. It's really down to the managers, really, isn't it? I mean, Steen, Ferguson, and McLean. Basically, kind of local teams and put them to levels. And I often look at Scottish football and I kind of you worry about it slightly. I mean, in the '50s and '60s, Hungary was one of the leading teams in European football. As I mentioned earlier, Ferencváros and Puskás Sosa, and another name I love was PK Budapest. What a name! Brilliant name. And they were in the '66 World Cup. Florian Albert, Ferenc Benny, they had guys like that were world class players. And you think, well, what happened? I mean, Hungary. You'd love to get Hungary, and he just disappeared. And I always worry that we on that, sort of thing. Have we, if you stepped outside Scotland and look back, have we disappeared a bit? Every now and again, we Celtic got to the final in Seville and Rangers got to Manchester. But they're so unusual for that to happen now. We used to be up there. If you look at that, between the mid '60s and the mid '70s, a number of European Cup semi-finals and things that constantly. Celtic Rangers would be running right through, and Kilmarnock and Dunfermline and teams like that. And used to be right in there. So I always slightly worry, and when people say, "Oh, the whole world will be looking at Scotland and Scottish football and laughing," and I think, I don't think they look at Scottish football much at all now. I think it's just some guy in Brazil's going, "Hey, have you seen what Scottish football have done?" I don't think they think the same. I think it's a shame. I think we somewhere we slipped. Somewhere we took a wrong turn, and we're still trying to get back up there. But,
well, look, hopefully it's a cyclical thing, and
well, that's the thing. I live in constant hope. I'm always thinking that it'll come back round again. If you get a manager comes up with a new way of doing it or something like that. And the players buy into it. I know that would be good. We all dream, don't we?
Exactly. So look, we're keeping it Scottish for your second choice. This is the first goalkeeper shirt I've ever had on the show, I think. And this is the yellow Scotland goalie top, 67 goalie top. I'm going to say the Ronnie Simpson goalie top, right?
Ronnie Simpson, yeah. That is. Well, yeah, I am a goalkeeper, and I use the present tense because I've not retired yet.
Good man.
I was playing up until, well, we played up until the lockdown, and then when they eased it, we played about 6 games again. It's a Sunday morning. It's a bunch of, we've been playing for years, coming up for 20 years, 11-a-side, hire a referee, and we're getting older, and this isn't as good as it used to be, but they're a great bunch of guys, and we have great fun. And from '67, Ronnie Simpson kind of inspired me to be a goalkeeper.
Right.
Tremendous grace. He wasn't a big guy or anything like that. The idea of the big guy goalkeepers are the thing, but well, he must have been about 5'8" or 9" if he was that. And
right, I didn't know that. Wow.
I walked behind him one day and I thought, God, he's the size of him. I mean, I'm 6 feet, but he was wearing me. And apparently what he used to do is when they were getting team photos taken, just as they were about to click, Ronnie would stand up and
I didn't know that.
I used to do that. Craig told me that in a Lisbon line, drop. He says, Ronnie used to go. But it didn't matter to him. I remember one time I was speaking to Stefan Kloss, the ex-Rangers guy, Borussia Dortmund, and I was struck. Andy Gorham was the same. They're not tall guys. They're not over 6 feet. And I said to Stefan Kloss, "How tall are you, Stefan?" And he said, "Tall enough." And I thought that's these guys are great goalkeepers. But so I mean he said Michael was the guy that the big goalkeeper was. He was the guy, in '67 when Scotland beat England 3-2 and became the world champions. Simpson made a couple of saves right at the death, late on. And I remember that game, and it was black and white, but I remember seeing a colour photograph from it of Simpson making one of the saves in the yellow, and he had the red and black socks, and it looked, that you see a strip, you go, wow, I need to have that. And I got a jersey. I got a Scotland jersey. The badge wasn't the proper badge, it was my birthday. I got that. Again, it shrunk. And it was really tight, but I still wore it with the proper socks. And I was known as, the people in Corside for a play. You're the wee guy that wears the Scotland goalies. I became famous for this thing. I also remember one time I got a bloody nose and I got blood on it. And that was when we washed it and it shrunk, but the blood marks were still there. I've been through the wars in that jersey. But it was such a great look. Just it looked great. And for a while, Scotland, again, they've changed things. But all Scotland goalkeepers tended to wear that. That was the strip. The first football book I ever got was called the Scottish Football Book Number 10. And the cover, it was Scotland beating England 1-0 at Hampden. Alan Gildeen scored the goal. And the goalkeeper was a guy called Campbell Forsyth, Kilmarnock goalkeeper, and that he was wearing the yellow and and that was when I saw that again. I thought, God, that is a cracking strip. And then when Ronnie Simpson, who was kind of my hero, I suppose, my idol, when he was. The strip was passed on to him. That was a great. The fact he was a Celtic goalkeeper, what have you, and that was me. I thought, like, I'm going to be a goalkeeper. I'd given up. Originally, I wanted to be a midfield general, but
So we'll move on to your final choice. Now, you picked two here. They're very similar. We're going to let it go. Usually, there's only three choices. You've got two Brazil shirts. It's the 1970 World Cup and the 1982 World Cup. They're both very similar, both very beautiful, both classics.
I found it hard. I slightly cheated because I thought because it's Brazil, kind of merge them together, sort of thing. The Brazil 1970 was that was kind of revelation for people of our generation. The World Cup in Mexico in '70 was the games kicked off around about 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night. So I was in second year at secondary school, and I would I get to sit up late to watch the football coming in, and it was very good. It was okay, and then suddenly Brazil appeared, and they seemed to have I don't know, 7 attackers or something like that. It was just like there was they always use total football when you're relating to the Dutch. I mean, Brazil in 1970 were an astonishing team.
Yeah.
In an offensive set. Defensively, they weren't great, but it was that thing. Well, if we lose a goal, we'll score two. I mean, and they invariably did. They were fabulous. Pele was considered an old man going into that game.
Yeah.
He just kicked the '66 World Cup, but Pele was finished. Pele was done. Written off. Pele, nah. All the emphasis was on Style, who was the white Pele, if you remember that. And then Pele suddenly, started bringing shots for the halfway line, dummying goalkeepers, scoring goals, setting up headers, everything, you name it. He could do everything. And I think that everybody was caught up there. Imagination, that's the way football, everybody wants to see football played.
Yeah.
Like when you throw in Brazino, Gerson, Clodoaldo, Rivellino, Carlos Alberto, and even they had a comical goalkeeper, a guy called Felix, I don't know if you remember him, who was suspect to say the least. A real character that was just a shrug of the shoulders. We've lost a goal. Let's drop it back and score some more.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick one, though, I'm going to go with the '82 Brazil team. That's the one, because it's bittersweet. There's a tremendous pathos about that strip because they didn't win the World Cup.
Yeah.
And should have. I read a book recently called Glorious Failure about that, about Brazil. Everybody loved Brazil in '82. Everybody loved them. The first, really became aware of the samba, beating the rhythm, and the whole game you had samba rhythm, and this football, that's the way they played football. And they had the three players, Zico, he was the latest white Billy, Socrates, and Adair. Three of the best players I'd ever seen. I mean, just the movement of these guys. And again, I just started working at the BBC at the time. I was a researcher, and everybody at the BBC, they all pissed off to the club at 5 o'clock, and a lot of the games kicked off then. And I just had this memory of the sun shining in '82, and I would get the office to myself, and it was a big television, and watching Brazil.
Lovely.
And they just looked, they kept winning, and they beat Scotland, even though David Neary, another Dundee United guy, scored with Slowpoke, as Jimmy Hill called it.
Yeah.
And they just looked, they were so good. And then, of course, I remember they played Italy and they got beat 3. I mean, for a neutral, I've never been so upset about a team getting out of the World Cup. And, meeting pals and go, what do you make of that? Brazil is out of the World Cup. It was such a shock. I also remember that the tops were quite tight and the shorts, remember tiny shorts that they used to.
The 80s.
The 80s, that time, I mean, before the big shorts came back in. But it just looked fabulous. And I remember at that game against Italy, Gentili marking Zico. I mean, and Zico turning him and losing Gentili and John Watson. Oh, what a turn! And I mean, it was astonishing football. So in a way, that my generation anyway, Brazil was the benchmark. I mean, in '66 World Cup, everybody thought Brazil was going to win it. I always remember that. It was Brazil, and the team weren't as good, and other teams had developed tactics that just like picking lumps at them, basically.
Kicked the game, didn't they?
And so 70 came and everybody sort of finished, they won. And then there was a long gap until '82 when they felt they had another team. And it was great that Brazil were back. It was like an old friend, and then of course they got beat. I should point out, just because we're talking about strips here, the other one that was nearly would have been, I would have thrown in as well if it had been 5 or 6, was the West Germany green strip from the mid-70s.
Beautiful.
I've actually I've got one of them, and it does fit me.
Nice.
I got a present a couple of years ago. It's got a badge, but because that was the one when West Germany beat England 3-0 at Wembley. It was 76, 77.
Right.
And Peter Netzer ran the show, the blonde.
Yeah, in the green.
He ran in the that is another one that I would have thrown in.
Well, Phil, that's 3 absolutely amazing choices. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.
So there you have it. Massive thanks to Phil for sharing his football kit memories with me. Don't forget to check out Smile, Phil's play about Dundee United legend Jim McLean, on the Dundee Rep Theatre website. You can follow me and my own collection on Instagram, or get in touch via Twitter or email. The music you heard was produced by Evil Ed. Check out his music on his Bandcamp. There's links to everything I've mentioned in the notes section. And finally, thanks for listening. If you have enjoyed it, please do spread the word, give me a follow on social, and subscribe to Football Kit Memories on your podcast player of choice. And other than that, I guess I'll catch you next time.